gamers? Power Word Heal here, and today we are looking at how to heal Blackwing Lair on a Druid in WoW Classic. So we get the whiteboard back out again, because this is what we did last time, and we're just going to basically do the same thing we did for the Priest video and the Druid video. So yeah, let's just kind of hop right into it. And the first encounter, right, which is Razorgore. So I'm going to draw the room here. I believe we use the highlighter thing. And then we'll start talking about what to do. So something like this. This is basically a rectangular room. And there's the platform over here, which has the orb, which mind controls the boss. The boss platform is over here. I'll put like a little X on this. This is the boss. This is the orb, right? And then there's little cubbies, like here, kind of, right? In these corners where ads come out of. And basically how this fight works is you just kill the ads that come out of the cubbies. You split into groups of 4. And then there's one person that uses this orb to mind control Razorgore, and he's breaking a bunch of these little eggs that are in the center of the room here. And once he breaks all the abilities with Razorgore's egg break ability, then Razorgore becomes active, and you can actually fight Razorgore. Razorgore himself is very weak. He can be a little bit scary. He does like a con flag, kind of like the con flag from the boss in UBRS. So that's a bit scary. But, you know, like his health pool is not very high. And a majority of the fight is basically dealing with the ads that come out in the phase 1 while these eggs are being killed. And there's also ads on the platform, but you kill them immediately once you run up there. So yeah, you basically start the fight by running up on the platform, you kill the ads, somebody mind controls the boss, and then the ads start spawning out of these cubbies. And you basically just farm them until all the eggs are killed, and then you go into phase 2. So as a druid, basically what you're going to be doing probably is you want to play between multiple corners. You're probably going to get assigned to a corner, but realistically, unless there's like no other healers there, you want to play between corners. So you may even want to play between all 4 corners if you can help it. But realistically, probably at least 1 or 2, right? So sometimes you could float between these, or maybe you float between these. And the idea is that you're just basically casting Fairy Fire on anything that moves, right? Anything that's not CC'd, anything that's being killed, which would probably be most things in this particular case, right? You can basically just Fairy Fire, and that helps your raid kill it. Now, you probably want to Fairy Fire things that like haven't already been started on, because the ads don't have a ton of health, right? So it tends to be like not imperative that you Fairy Fire them, you know, if they're like really low health or something like that, right? Like, because at that point you're not getting much value out of it. So if one's about to die or something, just Fairy Fire the other ones that are still up, you know, because you're going to be arriving to each corner at different times. And that's basically your job. And then you just heal people in between, right, where you see people get low. You give your innervate when needed. And outside of that, you have a sleep key, and it's called Hibernate. And you can basically like hibernate some of the Dragonkin that come out. I don't think, yeah, you can't root anything because we're indoors here, but you can hibernate some of the Dragonkin, which can sometimes be helpful, but honestly, most of the time, most people are just going to be able to kill all the ads relatively easily. So if the DPS of the group is like really poor, sometimes sleeping some of the ads can help. It takes a little bit of pressure off, but most of the time you're probably not going to be required to do that. So yeah, that's basically Razorgore. Once the boss spawns, you just want to be away from the boss, because again, he does the con flag, and you just you heal basically whoever he's targeting. And there's going to be, you know, people taking damage from the con flag. The thing with the like, this fight basically ends super fast. So if you're trying to parse or something, you need to use like regrowth on the people who are getting bursted by the con flag, and just hope that you get the healing off, right? And somebody else doesn't beat you to it. That's basically how you parse on this fight. And any healing done in phase 1 in damage, I think, doesn't count. So you don't really have to worry about that. So that is Razorgore. We'll erase this, and we'll go into the next boss, which is Vaelastrasz. So, Vaelastrasz has kind of like a similar room here, right? It's like this. Okay. Another rectangle. And there's basically like pillars here, right? There's like a pillar here. We'll say there's like a pillar here, and pillar here, and then the boss is in the middle. Okay. It's a dragon. So we got the dragon head, and then we've got the tail, right? And then you've got the raid, which is going to be like right here, most of your casters and healers. And then your melee are going to be on the other side typically. And basically, this fight is a druid's playground. Now, I should mention that there's a particular spec that you want to go, which is regrowth spec, right? And what we'll do actually is we'll pop over for a moment, right? And we'll go into characters here, and we'll go into one of these druids, right? It doesn't really matter which one. And we will go into the talents, and I'll basically show you how to build out the regrowth spec. So the regrowth spec looks like this. It doesn't really matter what like you do for this section over here in the balance tree. You basically just want 2 out of 2 Nature's Reach, and then you can go either Moonkin talents or you can go into natural weapons. Omen of Clarity doesn't work for this particular like build basically. So, well, it does work, but like you have to actually auto. You can't like it doesn't work off spells or anything. So getting it is not super imperative. So we'll just like put a couple points in here, put some points in here, and then we basically want Nature's Grace here, right? And then we come over here. We get this over here. You want this for sure. You need this talent for Blackwing Lair. It's very imperative because on the Veil fight, which we're talking about now, basically he does a pulsing fire aura that does casting pushback. And if you don't have this, it's going to be a nightmare. I mean, you can run greater fire protection potions, but it's just generally good to have this, right? So outside of that, you can basically put points in this, put a point in there, then you put a couple points in here, right? You could also change these out and put them in here if you want, and then you basically just put 5 out of 5 regrowth here. And the idea is you get 50% regrowth crit, and then you get another like 30% from world buff, so you're pretty much like 80-some% crit, which is insane. And yeah, the reason why this spec is so amazing is because you actually end up getting gear. See the Storm Rage gear from Blackwing Lair that reduces the cast time of your regrowth by 0.2 seconds. So there's a lot of synergy there. But the real reason why it tends to shine is because Blackwing Lair has a lot of instances where you're doing a lot of burst healing and then you have time for recovery. Right, and we'll kind of talk about that a little bit later when we get into the trash, because that's where a lot of that comes into play. But for the bosses, Veil is actually the first boss where Rejuve kind of goes crazy because you actually have infinite mana. So what that means is you can basically spam your max rank Rejuve and just never worry about going or anything like that. You don't have to care about your overhealing because your mana is infinite. And basically what you want to do is you just have regrowth with 80% crit. And you are just spamming it on everybody in the raid. Like, your job is to just pelt the raid with regrowths, right? Anybody who's taking damage, like, you hit them. And just trying to do, like, as much HPS as possible. Now, the other mechanic of Veil is he puts this buff called Burning Adrenaline on you, or a debuff. And basically, it makes, I believe, your actions faster. It kind of, like, gives you, like, more cast speed or whatever. But the downside is that you take progressively, like, your max health gets lowered and lowered and lowered. And at some point, I think at the end of the duration of the buff, you explode or something like that. Or you basically just, like, get too low health and then you die and then you explode, I think. So, in that particular case, it just works out even better for us because we're casting regrowth even faster, right? We can do even more HPS. There'll be some particular cases where you may want to cast max rank healing touch instead when you have that debuff. And the reason why is because max rank healing touch is actually an insane amount of healing. Like the max rank is like something like in the 2k base. So it's probably doing like, 3k, close to 3k with your plus healing, potentially more, and then it's probably critting for like on the order of like 4 point something k. Now you're not going to have the regrowth crit on healing touch, but you're still going to have like 30% crit, right? So pretty good chance to get a crit. And the Veil debuff makes you actually cast it so fast that it's actually kind of like worth when people are low enough to get the full effect of the heal to just bomb the max rank on people that are low. It's also a great spam tank heal because the way Veil works is like, I believe the burning adrenalines alternate between like tanks and ranged or something. So the tanks tend to get it first, and the tanks become very vulnerable, obviously, once they've had the buff for a while. So being able to ensure that you basically instantly put their health back, like every global, is like really good. So if you're like a druid that gets the burning adrenaline buff, like what I tend to like to do is you're in the group here, and then normally you'll move out once you've had the buff for a little bit, right? Once you're kind of in danger of dying, so that if you do die, you don't blow people up in the raid. You'll move to like right here or something, and this is where you'll explode. I actually meant to put this as green. But yeah, you'll go to right here, and this is where you'll explode. But before that, I like to play around like here-ish, right? So I'm kind of outside the main raid, and I can run here easily, but I'm still in range of the tank. And I just bomb heals on the tank, basically. Just bomb max rank healing touches, and that really helps out with the tank healing, whoever's healing at the time. So that's basically the strategy if you get the buff. If you don't have the buff, you're just like spamming regrowth on everything, right? And that's pretty much the way to get max HPS on that fight. The dragon has all the standard dragon rules, kind of, where you don't want to be in the cleave, you don't want to be near the tail. And the cleave on this fight is particularly nasty because it chains. So for example, like if somebody is standing here, right, and then somebody else is like, and let's say they get cleaved because they're too close to the front, it'll actually chain all the way down the melee and do an insane amount of damage. So you definitely don't want to get cleaved because it not only does it hurt you, it hurts other people, and it's just really not good, right? So that is basically Veil in a nutshell. This is where your regrowth has time to shine. What I would actually do is like, even if you don't plan on going regrowth spec for the entire raid, I would actually have it as your off spec, and then you would basically just go regrowth spec for this fight, and then you could go into your normal spec for the rest of the raid because it is so powerful for this fight, and it can actually like make the difference and save people's buffs and stuff. So you really do want to be regrowth on this fight. It's just like the most effective you could possibly be as a druid. This is like the most effective you're going to be on a druid at any point in the game, basically. So yeah, Veil is just like your fight. That is basically Veil. I can also make like videos specifically talking about that fight or showing you what a play on that fight would look like once the actual raid comes out, just to give you a better perspective. So coming back to the highlighter here. All right, so we're gonna do the Broodlord room next, which is like basically another. It's a rectangle that's kind of broken into two rectangles, right? Because what goes on here is there's a floor, right, like this, and then there's a stairwell, right? And so this is kind of like, I'll actually explain it better in a second. Okay, so this, I'm just gonna actually draw the whole thing out first, and then we'll start explaining it. Okay. Then okay, and then we'll have some just generic. Okay, so what do all these dots and stuff mean, right? So basically you're going to start here. This is like the safe zone. And when you look out in front of you, you're going to see a bunch of these suppression devices is what they're called. And these are basically traps that only rogues can disable. And they basically just slow you and your cast speed when you walk over them. So the idea of this room is you have to have rogues go ahead. They take down the traps in front of you while you clear out the ads. That's what all these little dots are. There's ads. There's two types of ads. There's basically like dragonkin and stuff. And then there's whelps. And the whelps basically just keep respawning. The other dragonkin will eventually respawn, but they take a while to respawn. So you're basically just clearing out the main mobs, clearing out the whelps, and you're, letting the rogues take down the suppression devices. There's a couple ways you can kind of like optimize to get through here. Like some people go here, then down and through the door. Some people go straight across. It really doesn't matter. Once you get in here, it's kind of like a safe spot. You can regenerate some mana. Then you walk up the stairs, right? And there's another gauntlet style room, the same as this on top, but there's little cubbies now this time. And you can basically use the cubbies to get a bit of a reprieve, right? So you can go like from here to this cubby, and then you basically just hold in one of the cubbies before the boss, and then you move all at once into the boss, basically, which is the red X, that's Broodlord. So how does Broodlord work? So basically this is the big like tank damage boss. It's mostly tank and spank, but there'll be a doorway over here. And typically the boss is tanked in the doorway, right? And, the ranged DPS clump and the healers tend to be standing over here. The melee are, like, around the boss over here. And basically what you do is you're just kind of, like, healing the main tank from here. And the idea is the main tank is going to get mortal struck. And it's going to do, like, a huge damage. He's going to get chunked really hard. Then your priests obviously want to shield him right after that happens, and you're just trying to pick him up as quickly as possible. This is a fight where, honestly, especially if you're not, like, speedrunning, like, if you're going to be able to remax your mana after the fight, keeping hots on the tank here is kind of okay. It's more useful than it normally would be, because there will be some point of the fight where the tank gets chunked huge, and, if the hots are there, and they do tick at the right time, they can be helpful. Now, that's not going to be a guarantee. They might not do anything, right? But it's a very short fight, relatively speaking, so it's not really going to be that mana intensive. So as long as you have the capability of keeping some hots on the tank, it's not really like a bad thing to do, right? But basically, as a druid, what you're going to be kind of doing is you're just going to be cancel casting on the tank, waiting for his health to drop from that huge hit, and then trying to let your heal finish at that point and heal him with a large healing value. You might actually be better using, if you're like while you're in the process of cancel casting on him, one of your higher rank healing touches, because you want it to be really effective when it actually does have to land, right? Because you're most likely going to need to do a significant amount of healing. As for the other mechanics, there he does like a blast wave that knocks the melee back. If you're standing over here and you're deep enough, you shouldn't really get hit by that. But the idea is that basically, you're just healing that back after every blast wave so that people don't die to the next blast wave. Very, very simple. You could theoretically do that with hots, but most of the time they're probably just going to get sniped. So I'd probably just recommend doing it with heal rank 4 or healing touch rank 4 rather. So, and as a druid, there's not really a way that you can preempt the damage here very well. I guess you can start getting rejuves out, maybe like if he hasn't done the blast wave in a while, if you know the timer's coming up. But that's kind of getting into wasting a lot of mana. So again, it just depends on if you have the mana to spare or not. But that would kind of be like how you try and parse the fight. And then you would just cast like regrowth on the targets because it's the quickest heal if you were trying to parse it. Or like I said, if you're trying to be efficient, you heal them back with heal rank 4. So very easy fight, very straightforward fight, and yeah. We'll move on to the Drakes. Okay. So there's a couple strategies to this fight. It's going to be a little bit annoying to draw this, but bear with me here. Oops, this is not, okay. All right, so we've got the room here. We'll do this is where the doorway is, right? Then here's the next room. Okay. So this is basically right where you killed Broodlord, right, from the last room. And there's a boss behind him that, like, pats in this direction, basically, right? So he's goes from there to there, the 2 X's. Now there's going to be trash in these rooms, so you have to basically kill some of the trash, right? And then you can kind of poke into the next room, and you want to catch the boss right when he's like at the furthest point in his path coming towards the door, and you just pull him back into the door, right? And I'm going to actually draw the door situation separately because it's going to be just easier. There's going to be more visual clarity here. Okay. So I'm going to we'll do it like this, right? So this is, oops, that's the wrong color. Okay. So we've got so you can think of this as kind of like okay, so this is like where the door is basically. This is like the gate that is now open, right? And again, this is basically where you killed Broodlord. The boss originally starts over here. You drag him over to the door, right? And there's basically a couple mechanics with this boss, right? Where he hits the tank really hard, okay? He can multi-hit or flurry on the tank. And he seems to do a lot of damage when he switches targets from the main tank to the off tank. And I presume that's probably because maybe if the taunt transition isn't super smooth, like he can't get an auto in, you know, the moment the first hits happen and stuff, then he maybe stores an auto attack or two and then unleashes it on the next target. So that can be a little bit of a problem. So it's a very, very high tank damage boss. And if you're trying to play like efficiently and play well, you're mostly going to be cancel casting on the tank throughout this fight, right? Basically how this fight works is the boss is going to be tanked in the doorway. Now there's a couple of ways you can do this. You can have the boss, right? Let's say he's the red circle. You can have him facing this way towards this pillar, right? And in that case, you would have your healers and stuff over here, right? And you would have your tank over here, right? And then you'd have your melee DPS kind of over here. And the idea would be that, you know, you can heal the tank from this LOS right here. Then there'll be an off tank usually that's like over in this direction, right? And you can either have healers on the other side here, right? They heal the off tank, or you can have some of these healers from this stack kind of rotate out a little bit to heal the off tank to get LOS on him, right? When the boss is taunted over in this direction. Okay, and the reason why the taunts have to happen is because he does like what's called a wing buffet, which lowers the main tank's threat. So the idea is the off tank wants to take that so that the main tank can maintain full threat. So you taunt, which automatically puts you to the top of the threat table. The boss buffets you, and then the main tank can take threat back. Is kind of like the idea, right? And then the reason why we're talking about LOS, right, and why you can't just be anywhere out in front of the boss is because the boss applies a damaging stack to everybody who's basically an LOS of him. And this just keeps ramping up until you break LOS. So you want to stay out of LOS in these particular spots, right, where I've marked for the healers. And then you basically can walk into LOS to do healing when necessary, and then you retreat back into the LOS spots. The melee eventually have to get out and get into LOS spots as well. Okay. Now the other way, that you can kind of do this boss, right? And let me see if I can undo some of this. Right. Okay. Yeah, so the other way you can do this boss is that he is being tanked in the doorway again, right? But he's actually being faced this way. So it's like this, okay? And then the off tank, so there's a main tank that is right here, right? And then there's an off tank that's right here. And then there's healers here and healers here. And the idea is that the range and the healer, so the healers here are healing the range basically, which are in the same group, because the range most of the time need to be in LS the boss to hit him, right? So they stay in LOS, they hit him a bunch of times, they retreat back, they get healed up, right? And then the healers on this side are healing the tank over here. And then both healers should theoretically have access to the off tank when the boss turns over here. Sometimes, depending on the angle, these healers will have a better angle, and these guys have to step out a little bit more to make sure they get the angle that covers both of these. But it's basically the same concept as the other strat, just done a little bit differently. What you're going to do is basically just going to depend on your guild, right? So pay attention to kind of like what they want to do, and just be ready to go where they need you. This is not like a fight where Druid plays a key role, in my opinion. Like all the other fights, your job is basically just keep Fairy Fire up here, and then you heal when you can, right? But you don't have a lot of the same tools to like save the tank as the other classes. Like I said, the best thing you can do is just like spot heal, and then like cancel cast big heals on the tank. And particularly maybe let them try and land after the boss's breath, right? For maximum effect. But yeah, there's just not a whole lot you're going to be able to do to change the tide here. If your guild is good at doing this fight, it's going to be easy. If they're bad at doing this fight, it's most likely because they're bad at doing the mechanics. It's going to be hard for you to carry. The one thing that I will say is, like I said, the bosses do hit really hard. And the best thing you can kind of do is have the boss targeted, right? Because if you have the boss targeted, you can see the boss's target. And that means you can just spam heals on the boss's target. And you could spam like the cancel casting, right? So that's basically the best thing you can do here. And yeah, there's not really much else to say. So that is Flamegor. Or Firemaw, sorry. Now, the next two bosses are Ebonroc and Flamegor. And these, I'm not even actually going to dignify with the diagram, because they're super simple. Like, you can stand wherever you want, you just heal the tank, and again, it's basically like before, you just want to make sure that when another tank taunts, you're healing them right away, because they actually do sometimes store attacks and hit quite hard, but other than that, there's not really much to those fights, so there's not really a ton to go over. Moving on to Chromaggus, right? So Chromaggus is a little bit of an interesting fight. It's basically like a big dog, and there's a doorway, right? And then, oops, I'm just going to delete this and go again. So there's a doorway, right? And then kind of goes like this. And the boss starts out being over here, right? And then once you open the lever and you open the gate, you drag him out until he's basically here. His head is basically just level with the outside wall or pillars here. He's mostly being tanked in the doorway. The melee line up behind him, right, to do damage. All the range are basically clumped on a side like this. And the reason why you play the fight like this is because he does breaths, and when he does breaths, you can avoid them by LOSing them, right? And you basically want to LOS all of the breaths except one, which is time lapse. Now, what the breaths do, or it's not really super important for you to know, because the idea is that, you know, you're dodging them, obviously, right? And they're just hitting the tank. But the time lapse one is very important, because what it does is it basically makes it so that you are like dazed or stunned or something like that, right? And if you don't get hit by the time lapse, he actually tends to target you. Like I believe like when everybody else is time lapsed, the people he goes after are the people who did not get time lapsed. It's just going to be random out of those people. So if you're like a healer or somebody really squishy, you absolutely do want to get time lapse, right? So that you don't really have to deal with that. That's the only one you really have to pay attention to. Other than that, there's this mechanic where basically a bunch of debuffs periodically come out in the fight. There's some poisons, diseases, curses, and magic debuffs. As a druid, you want to be removing the poison and the curse one. There's basically, I think, 4 or 5 debuffs, and what happens when somebody gets all of them is they transform into a dragonkin, which does like a ton of damage, can't be CC'd, and basically you stay like that until the fight is over. That is something you don't want to happen. That's kind of like one of the only ways you'll wipe on this fight is if you have a bunch of those up. So if you just dispel, then you can kind of single-handedly carry the fight in that respect, because the player cannot turn if they don't have all the debuffs on them. So with you being able to clear 2 debuffs, both curses and poison, it's very easy to basically ensure that, you know, the max stack somebody can get at any given moment is like 3, and then you just bring them down to 2, right? So you can kind of perpetually keep them at 2 and protect them from themselves. So yeah, that's basically the fight. It's just a whole lot of dispelling and some tank healing, right? You're going to be cancel casting on the tank who is basically standing in front of the boss right here. And then you also sometimes have a healer in the melee that heals the melee, dispels the melee, etc. You can feel free to transition between this zone, right, and the melee zone in the back. This is where the melee go to LOS. But you just want to make sure that the boss isn't going to be breathing. So you want to make sure you're familiar with this DBM timer before this actually happens, because otherwise, you can get caught by the breath, and that's not good. So that's basically Chromaggus. Like I said, mostly just a dispel fight. Other than that, you just heal people with rank 4 healing touch, spot heal them like you do for the other Drake fights, and then you are pretty golden. So moving on to Nefarian. Okay. So Nefarian is, the room is basically something like this. Let's actually go back for a moment. Okay. So it's another basically rectangular room, right? And there's cubbies here. And then there's the throne, which is like this, right? So when you walk in, you talk to Nefarian, and that engages the fight. And then he basically kind of like runs off, and a bunch of dragonkin spawn from these 2 cubbies. And you basically, I think you have to kill 40 total. So it's like 20 out of each cubby or something like that. It probably doesn't have to be exact. And once you do that, the next phase of the fight starts, where the actual dragon comes down, which is Nefarian himself. Now, the only really important thing about the first phase of the fight, you're just going to be standing in the cubbies, healing when needed, casting Fairy Fire, is that Nefarian teleports around the room near the range stack, and it's fine if he's like close to you but not in melee range and he's casting Shadow Bolt on you. But if he's meleeing you, you can actually die incredibly quickly. So if he starts to melee you, just make sure you're paying attention, you run and move, and then you'll pretty much be all set from that. Outside of that, there's really nothing that's going to kill you or pose you much challenge in Phase 1. Now, Phase 2 is a little bit of a different story. So Nefarian does what's called class calls, where he basically does different things based on the class, right? And the main ones that you have to look out for here are the Wild Polymorph, which is the Mage class call, and then the Warrior class call, where the tank has to be in Berserker stance the entire time, and I think takes additional damage on top of the normal Berserker damage debuff, right? So the Polymorph is obviously bad because, it's just not great to be polymorphed in a raid encounter, right? I'm pretty sure you can shift out of this still. Not 100% sure on that. I'll have to wait to confirm that. But I'm pretty sure it still works. So as a druid, it's not really that much of a concern for you. For other classes, it's obviously much more of a concern. And then the warrior call, like I said, is basically when the boss forces the warrior to be in Zerker stance and they take additional damage on top of that. This is where you can kind of see tanks get one-shot sometimes, or pretty close to one-shot. Because if Nefarian kind of lines things up in just the right way, it's very possible for a tank to get basically one-hit killed or very close to it, right? So in order to mitigate that, what you're trying to do is you're basically cancel casting super hard, and you're saving your nature swiftness until when that warrior call is coming out, to be able to instantly boost his life back up if he does take a really big hit, right? And you want to have that macroed with your highest rank healing touch, obviously. Outside of that, you're basically just kind of playing the fight as normal with your rank 4 healing touch. You're trying to spot heal with it as much as you can. This is another fight where if you have the mana, it's kind of okay to keep some hots on the tank. However, it tends to be a little bit of a longer fight. So if your guild is not really that strong DPS-wise, you don't have a lot of gear healing-wise either, it may be wiser to just kind of conserve your mana and, just save it for the actual rank 4 healing touches. So it's gonna depend on your rate a little bit, but it's just not really a hard boss overall, and those are the two main calls you have to actually look out for. I believe that when he does the druid call, he puts you into feral form or something like that, so there's not really anything you can do about that until the form is done. But then once he releases you, you just go back to normal, so it's not really that big a deal. But yeah, the main ones are just the warrior and the mage call. And that is pretty much all the bosses. I think I pretty much explained how to play them pretty well, but remember, if you're trying to be efficient, you're heavily relying on healing touch rank 4. You're basically using this as your spot heal, kind of like a priest would their flash heal, even though it's a longer cast time. And, it's harder to play, but you're just trying to get as much value with it as possible. There are certain fights you can obviously hot and dot, like Vaelastrasz. You can pre-hot people, right? Pre-hot the tank, etc. You're going to be spamming regrowth on the rest of the fight, though. And then on fights like Broodlord, you could potentially use hots if you wanted, if you think you're going to have the mana pool for it, just to kind of help in that clutch situation where the warrior gets brought really low for the Immortal Strike. You're basically doing the same thing on the other two Drakes. You're just cancel casting Healing Touch, right? On a Chromaggus, primarily a Dispel fight, but again, you're going to be cancel casting on the tank when you're not dispelling. And finally, Nefarian, again, basically cancel casting on the tank at all times, basically, once the boss comes down in Phase 2. So the boss comes down in Phase 2, and he's basically, you tend to face him this way, right? So this is his head, this is his tail. You basically face him out overlooking the platform, and there's melee on both sides or one side of him, just doing a bunch of damage. And then a lot of times you will be off to the side. You have to be a little bit careful because the range of his breath is quite large, right? So it can hit people that are trying to stand off to the side but are maybe a little bit too close. So you want to make sure that you're, decently far away. He also does a fear. You can range the fear if you play on the outskirts, but you have to be able to play on the outskirts, range the fear, and then come back in. So it can be a little bit tricky there because a lot of the timers don't exactly work right. But that'd be kind of the optimal way to play the fight as a healer, right? And on this fight, again, you can kind of keep the tank stacked with hots if you want. I don't think it's a super big deal. But you're basically just cancel casting on him with high rank healing touches, and then you're spot healing with the rank 4 healing touch. And then it basically should be a kill, right? Just very easy. At 20 or 30%, all the ads you killed respawn as skeletons, and they come chase you, but it's really easy to deal with them, especially if your raid has a bunch of Holy Water, or even if you just have casters to AoE them down, Nova them, etc. They're crowd controllable, so super easy. They can be slowed, everything like that. And yeah, just like that's pretty much it, I think. I want to talk a little bit about some of the trash. And basically the trash right after Vaelastrasz, you might be asked to hibernate one of the Dragonkin of the pack, because they're just very, very strong, obnoxious packs, and it helps to CC one of them. If that's your job, I would actually just spam the hibernate key on that particular mob. I mean, you can kind of like pan out a little bit and do some healing when everything seems safe, but you really don't want your hibernate to break, obviously, as other people are counting on it not being broken, right? So it's perfectly fine to kind of just like stand there and spam hibernate on your target until the pull gets under control. Then you can start doing a bit more healing, right? And again, that is the trash just before Broodlord and just after Vaelastrasz. So, going into some of the other trash packs would be like the tech packs in the raid. And these are very common in the room that Firemaw was in. And they basically do high AoE, kind of like, how would you say it? Kind of like Goblin Dynamite little hits on you. Basically, they like throw at you an explosive that does damage to you and people around you. So you want to keep moving when fighting them. And as a druid during this section, this is a great and fantastic time to put the rank 9 regrowth or whatever it is into full effect, because the idea is that it's going to be pretty much like a short burst. So you don't really have to worry a ton about going right? Because like you're going to be able to regen after every pack. So the idea would be, you pull a pack, the damage is a lot of damage, it's like very volatile, you're trying to make sure you can keep up, so you're using max rank rejuve and you're just spamming it on a couple people. And it's doing pretty good work. And then you're kind of low on mana. You can just drink immediately after as the next pack is being pulled, then basically like rinse and repeat, right? So that's how I deal with like the tech packs. I just try and use like the fastest heal possible there to help save people. Won't always do that depending on the circumstances, but it's something that I employ pretty commonly when I'm doing the tech packs. And then the final set of ads, I would say, are like the Dragonkin that have like the dual blades or whatever it seems like. And they're kind of like taller, they're gray, they've got like a scythe type thing. They're a sickle that has like, or it looks like it's like a pole arm or something like that. And basically they just hit really hard on the tank. They're kind of like mini Broodlords. But the other problem is that they randomly kind of like charge people, and they're called spinners because they start spinning their weapon and moving towards a player, and you just have to like avoid them, kind of kite them out. You don't want to kite them to Narnia if you can avoid it, but just kite them, like around circles or like around to where your group is going to be and stuff like that, and you basically should be fine. The one thing is that because these guys do hit like really hard, if you're trying to keep multiple tanks up, it can be a little bit tricky. The best way to do that would be probably to regrowth, rejuvenate one of them, and then just heal the other one normally, throwing in some of those spells when appropriate, right? And yeah, they basically can just do a ton of damage, and the problem is like, if your tank 1 is getting chunked down, tank 2 is getting chunked down, and tank 3 is getting chunked down, that's kind of where communication can kind of break down a bit. And if you're not really sure about who's supposed to be healing who, then, it's very easy for people to die there. But if you have that kind of like planned out and you're, like ready to go for the most part, then these things should be relatively easy. You shouldn't have to worry about, the spinners or anything like that too much. I think the tech packs, generally speaking, are some of the more dangerous trash in there, and then the spinners will probably be next, but there's not much else after that. There's not many other trash packs, so Yeah, that's basically it. And then in terms of dispels and stuff like that, again, basically the dispels on Chromaggus, right? And then after that, I can't really think of anything else. So I think you're kind of like off scot-free there. But if you do happen to notice something that you see that you think is bad, feel free to comment it on the channel, or just take it off yourself if you deem that it's that bad, right? So yeah, that's basically the guide, boss by boss, talking about a little bit of the trash. I hope you guys enjoyed this and liked it. There's gonna be more videos coming out in the next couple of days. We're gonna do Paladin, Blackwing Lair Phase Bis, Shaman, Blackwing Lair Phase Bis, and then we're going to do healing guides on those classes as well. So yeah, thank you guys very much for watching. I like, comment, subscribe if you found this useful, and I will talk to you guys next time. Power Word Heal.